Hello,
Oh,
everyone. Eric Perez from Talking Leadership. Thank you for joining me again. For this podcast, I have the pleasure of being joined by Grahame Turk, the chair of Sydney Fish Markets. How are you, Graham?
yeah, great, Eric. Thanks. And you?
Not too bad, mate. So, for the information of the listeners, I have worked with Graham on and off in the 10 years that I've been in the seafood industry, and I was hoping to get him on one of these podcasts at some point to talk about his leadership pathway. So here we are, and I'm going to ask a series of questions. So I'll start with the one I've started with for every podcast to date is, what was your first leadership role in industry, Graham?
I think you've got to go back before that because I think there are leadership roles, important leadership roles, before you actually go into a job. And in my case, I got married at a fairly early age and had children at a fairly early age. And um, that's the first time really that you are responsible for other people and you have other people whose trust you need and whose confidence in your decision making that you need, and that's about leadership. So, it's a bit of it's a bit mind blowing when it first happens, as you would know, being a parent, and you've really got to stop and think. I'm responsible for other people. I'm responsible for their well-being, for their financial, making sure they're fed and clothed, and making good decisions about where to live, where to educate them, and all that. So I think leadership starts then, when you start to be responsible for other people than just yourself. But to answer your question, I was in the gas industry. I went through university on a scholarship from a company called Commonwealth Industrial Gases, and I was an accountant. And so I suppose my first leadership role was there as an assistant accountant responsible for a small accounting department.
Okay. Any particular reason you took on that role, Graham?
It was where my education had led me. Thankfully, I got out of accounting a long time ago. It's a bit boring, but that's why I took that role on. That was my training, and but I always had an ambition, and even before then, back in university days, I remember I always wanted to be chief executive of a listed public company. I thought that was the ambition. When I finally got there, I wondered why, but that was my aim in life.
Okay. So in your travels, Graham, what do you see if there is any difference between management and leadership?
I think there's a huge difference between management and leadership. I'm not sure what the academics say, but I think leaders lead and managers manage, and it's possible to be a leader without being a manager, but it's, I think, almost impossible to be a good manager without being a good leader. So I think there's a vast difference.
Okay. So one of the questions I've been asking that is, I guess, as much as you can be introspective on these things, is leaders make mistakes. So how do you engage with mistakes as you've made them in your roles? Because what I've been finding is people have been telling me you're not a good leader if you're not making mistakes along the way. Have you found that in your career pathway, Graham?
Yeah, well, I think I'd agree with what people have said to you in that, you really, from the day you're born, you only learn from making mistakes. You can't learn from being right. So you have to make mistakes to learn. Unfortunately, some of those mistakes have fairly dire consequences, and the hardest part I think about leadership is making mistakes that affect other people badly, and yes, I've made those, and they're hard to live with when you're affecting other people's lives by the decisions that you're making. You have to be brave, you have to be courageous, but boy, it hurts when you make the wrong ones.
Sure. And another thing that's been brought up again, a common theme that's coming through the discussions that I've been having with leaders of various types is they learnt from mistakes they saw other good leaders that they came up with make, and saw how they engaged with those mistakes. Did you have that in your career pathway? Did you have a mentor or a leader that talked to you about taking some tumbles or making some mistakes and being able to work on those and almost use them as an opportunity to learn?
Yeah, I certainly did. I had basically my first sort of boss, if you like, going back about 50 years. I put up a proposal once to the board of this company, and it got knocked back. It was the right thing to do. It was about decentralized computing, and it was the right thing to do, but I didn't put the case well enough. So it got turned down, and my boss said to me, "The biggest crime you've made is being right and not getting it right. You know, you were right to put this up, but you didn't do it properly." And I've never forgotten that. But you do learn from other people, and you learn from having, I think, managers to whom you report that don't do it so well, and I can think of some that I've had. I'm not terribly patient when it comes to that, poor management from above. I've had to, in the past, take care of business for people who have been bad managers, and I've had to, for example, make a lot of people redundant in one particular exercise. And their only crime was that they had a bad boss. They had a manager who just didn't manage properly. The business went bad, and those people lost their jobs, and it was because of bad management, not because of them. It's very hard when you're sitting there, somebody that's been working for a company for 25 years, and they're getting on a bit, and you have to tell them they don't have a job anymore, and it affects them emotionally, and you think, you poor thing, the only problem you had was having a bad boss. I've rambled on a bit.
No.
You do look at how other people manage, and sometimes you see that the way that they're doing it isn't the way you should be doing it.
No, it's not, there's no right or wrong here. And you're definitely not rambling, mate. That it's something to learn from, I guess, and it kind of answers the next question I had about what's the most difficult part about being a leader. So if I can paraphrase what you said before, it's about the consequences on other people that may have had nothing to do with poor decision making from a manager or another leader at another level within an organisation, but other than that, I know that's not, this isn't a throwaway line, because I know from the discussion we're having, I can tell in your voice that this stuff sticks with you. But are there other aspects of being a leader that you find difficult?
I'd have to say none that spring to mind, Eric. I've never had trouble making decisions, even though I'm a Liberal. I've never had trouble making big decisions. I have trouble making small decisions, what socks to wear, but I can make fairly large, important decisions really easily.
Okay, sure.
I don't find that challenging. I don't find dealing with people a problem. I've always been able to deal with people at all levels. I came from a fairly poor working class background, so I can talk to people at all levels. That I don't find difficult. No, it is the people aspect, and when you get it wrong, you really feel it. You do get it wrong.
So again, it's something a bit more positive. How do you measure success as a leader, Grahame?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. End of podcast. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. And we'll leave it there.
Yeah, well, we'll get rid of that Turk podcast. He was pretty useless. But look, it's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think back over the years, and I think the things that I think about now are not the issues about reaching budget or making record profits or whatever. I still have lunch with guys that I worked with 40 years ago, and that to me is success. That means that you had a good relationship, you did some right things, but you forget about all the other stuff, the stuff that seems so important on the day. I've got to get this done by such and such, and I've got to achieve this by then, and you just forget about all that. That's what you do. It comes with the patch, and you get on and do it. But it's not success.
Okay, sure. I'm hearing or reading between the lines at least that it's the relationships that you forge in those positions that for you are a marker of success.
Yeah, it's the people that you help up along the way. You see people grow under you and move on and so on, and that's the success. You really get a lot of satisfaction out of. It's like watching your kids grow. You develop people and you see them achieve great things, and you think, wow, that's I helped them along the way there.
Yeah. Okay. And this is an emerging theme from the podcast around how you judge success. So some of the other interviews that I've done and discussions were around, well, there's a difference between those KPI things and then those things that are in the job that are about people. And my last interview with John Black, which happened yesterday, he said to me the same thing, that he gets a lot of satisfaction and a buzz from seeing the people he used to work for and with, and particularly junior, sort of move up the scale and do whatever it is that they're doing, whether or not they've become an expert in an area, whether they've moved up with the organisation itself or they've gone on to do other things, that's what brings an innate level of satisfaction, more so than achieving what he's achieved personally, because those things you have to do more about getting the job done versus what is going to build careers and build yourself in a role. Does that ring true for you?
Yeah, that's it. Basically. Yeah,
Okay.
It's about satisfaction with what you've done for people and with people, and it's not all selfless, but I mean it's it's very satisfying, I think, to look back and think about the people that you might have. They probably would have done it themselves without you, but you go on an ego trip and you say, I helped them along.
Okay. So just trying to get your views, Grahame, on a couple of statements here. So one is, on-the-job experience develops better leaders.
Oh, I'd have to agree with that. I'd have to agree with that. You learn from mistakes and you learn from experience, and the more you're exposed to things, I can't see how you can be an effective leader. You've got to grow. I mean, leaders grow too.
Yep.
So you grow from that experience and exposure.
Sure. Next statement: formal education helps to develop better leaders.
Yes, I think it does too. I've had my eyes opened by some experts in some areas that have said, certain things, and you think about that, and you think, okay, they're right about that. So I think education is important. I think you have to start with the right raw material. So people, as far as leadership is concerned, born leaders, grown leaders, whatever, you have to have the right stuff to start with.
That's so. See, this is a problem with people in your position. You guess the next question I was going to ask. So I'll ask it now before you finish, and it's not a bad thing. It's just that in thinking about this, leaders are born, not made. So is your view that organisations, a leader can be developed, or they just have some innate qualities that make them become better leaders?
Yeah, I don't think it's an either or, Eric. When you say leaders are born, not made, I think I think you have to be born with the right raw material. But if you have the right raw material and it's not developed, then you're not going to be a leader either. So you've really got to do both, and you've got to have the right chemistry, I think, to be a leader. You have to have certain personality qualifications, if you like, but then it needs to be educated, and yeah, you never stop learning, and some of that's formal and some of it's informal. I've met some great leaders who have had no formal education at all, but they're pretty wise people. I think you've got to have, I think wisdom's probably what it's about. You've got to start with some wisdom, because if you're not wise, then you're not going to pick up on the messages and the learnings and so on.
Is that when you talk about, I mean, you can unpack that word wisdom in lots of ways, but is what you really mean an ability to listen to other people? Is that what you're saying?
It's not just listening to other people. I think it's learning. It's learning from your own mistakes as well.
Sure.
Because if you're not prepared to learn, or you can't, if you always think you're always right, you'll never learn from your own mistakes either. So it's listening to other people. It's being empathetic. It's developing some skills. I mean, the formal or on job education process will include communication skills and so on, which you would not necessarily have naturally. But if you're not a receptive sort of a person, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so here's one that I've been asking again every participant in the podcast around some of the research I've started to do, and I make no claims to expertise here, which is why the podcasts are happening, because I want to learn from other people and I want to share what you've done in your leadership pathway. But part of what I'm doing in my thesis is asking the question, is making the statement, I guess, or posing that strategic thinking and foresight are the key leader capabilities going forward from an industry perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. If you don't have some strategic thinking, then you can't be an effective leader unless you have some vision, which is, I suppose, what strategic thinking is about. It's about having a vision and then going out and achieving it. Because having a vision without action is just a dream. So that doesn't work. But I've lost track of your question again, haven't I?
No, that's okay. So that's all right. So you've answered the bit about strategic thinking. The other capability that I'm looking at is foresight. So that ability to look forward and see what possible futures might be there for that leader as the two key capabilities that are the core of what we need for fit for future leaders might look like.
Yeah, I've always found hindsight to be much more effective than foresight. But yeah,
Okay.
You've got to have some foresight. You've got to have that vision. You've got to have. You've got to be able to think about what possible scenarios are going to evolve from whatever situation you're in or whatever action you're taking. So yes, you do have to have some foresight. Whether they're the most important aspects of leadership, I don't know. I think you could probably have those and still get it wrong.
Okay, and that's an important observation because I can't so one step back, I have to be able to delimit my study, and that means being able to do a chunk of work that I can get done in a certain amount of time. So I could look at 100 different leader capabilities, and I'd be spending the rest of my life writing a paper about leadership. So in your travels, could you have a functional, effective, goal achieving leader without them being strategic thinkers or having some foresight capability? If you didn't have those things, okay.
no. It's an essential. Those two things are an essential.
So let me pose something to you, because I'm learning as I'm speaking to people. So this is the best way I learn, because I'm pretty thick when it comes to things. So I need to talk to people to get my thinking out there. Is some have suggested that authenticity and communication are the way you implement strategic thinking and foresight. That without those elements, those leader capabilities, that you really can't take people on any kind of journey if you can't communicate what you're trying to do.
Yes.
Does that ring true for you, Grahame?
Yes, you have to be able to communicate, but it has to be genuine. I think unless you believe in it yourself, and unless you are genuine about your concern for other people and for what's to be achieved, if you're not genuine, people will see right through that. And I've had situations like that where I've had people trying to lead and trying to sell a story, but you know that their heart's not in it, or they don't actually believe it themselves. So yeah, you can't lead unless you can communicate and unless you're genuine.
Okay, and thank you for sharing that, because I was speaking in one of the podcasts, and I'll send you the links to these, to Artie Raptis in Brisbane, and he said the same thing. He was quite adamant that, and he said it a few times in the interview, and it's good to be able to just check this off with other people that I'm speaking to, that degree of authenticity, if that's not there, if people have their bullshit radar up and they see that you're not in it, your heart's not in it, leadership really goes nowhere, because you can't take people with you if they don't think you're invested in the vision, or wherever you're taking your organisation or business.
Absolutely right. Yeah, no, I agree with Artie on that. And I mean, that's the other thing, that when you mention Artie, the other thing you've got to be is brave. You've got to be courageous, and be prepared to back your decisions. Because if you're a bit sort of a bit each way about it, and you're unsure, and you're a bit scared of it, people pick that up too. And they're not going to follow somebody who's not really confident in their decision, right or wrong. And as we've said, people make mistakes, but you don't do it purposely. And when you make a decision, you've got to be you've got to be passionate about it, and you've got to believe in it. Because if you don't believe in it, who you're fooling? Can't even fool yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I can't speak for other industries, but I know in the fishing industry, when you're talking to either members or other people, I think our BS reader is quite attuned, and I think it's the nature of this industry that you develop that particular skill, because you need it to survive in an industry that is constantly changing and evolving. So that I don't know what words to put around it yet, but because I've heard it so many times in these discussions, that I think that level of personal intuition to be able to then take something forward is really important in someone who takes a leadership role. Because if you can't sort of see what's coming by intuition, and that's based on experience. And again, I'll probably be shot down here by some of my colleagues that are academics in this space, but I don't know yet how to operationalize this thing about intuition, and whether or not that's really part of being having some foresight capability, or whether it's something else. Because like you, in my travels, I've seen some really good leaders that will sometimes make decisions based on not a gut feel, but a very educated guesstimate, and they've gone, right, this is how we need to go, and they'll be proven right, but they at least take that step to make a call. And that sometimes can't come, you might have all the information in the world, but if you don't feel the decision is right, it's not a decision that you take. Does that ring true in your experience?
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely, Eric. And when you look at today's environment, despite the troubles that I had trying to connect with with iPods and so on, because I'm a bit of a troglodyte when it comes to this modern technology. Today's era is about wisdom, because everybody has the knowledge. Everybody has the knowledge about just about everything. If you don't want, if you want the information on something, Google it, and you've got it. So everyone's sort of got equal education or knowledge about that, but what they don't have is equal wisdom. So you need to be able to. So it's the same with business decision making and so on. You get a whole lot of information and a whole lot of data. But in the end, you have to condense that down to making a decision, and it can come down to a gut feel. It can come down to a gut feel about the people who are going to be implementing it, about whether that information is reliable or not. But yeah, it does get down to gut feel. There's no good just making gut feel the only the only qualifier. You can't just decide everything by a coin toss. You have to have, whatever information you can get to lead you towards making a decision. But in the end, you got to say, well, it's either this or it's that.
Okay, great. So the last question, Grahame, because I don't want to eat up all your time. I know you're busy like most of us are in this crazy world.
I've got an afternoon playing poker with my mates.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well there you go. What would you say to a younger version of yourself about being an effective leader?
Yeah, so I remember one of the years and years and years ago, I read something that Charles Lloyd Jones was asked for his advice to aspiring business people, directors, and so on. And his response was, "Choose your parents carefully." I've never forgotten that. Advice for, wow. I don't know if I'm qualified to advise anybody, to be honest. We're all individuals. You've got to do it your way. You've got, and we are different. We're different makeup. Different leaders have different styles and so on. I mean, I've always been a bit of a warmonger, and my successor at Sydney Fish Market is a peacemaker, and that's the way it had to be. So, I think probably honesty. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with your people for sure, but also be honest with yourself. Don't try and fool yourself. You are what you are, and you can be something more if you're prepared to put in the yards. But yeah, be honest, be fair dinkum. You'll never be a leader unless you are.
Wow. Okay. On that extremely positive note, this has been Eric Perez. I'd like to thank you, Grahame, for joining me today.
Been a pleasure, Eric. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.